What up guys, in this video I'm gonna show you a small ambient garage track idea that I made. It was heavily influenced by Burial. This sounds like this. So yeah, let's jump straight into FL Studio and break down this idea. Let's go. Okay, so this is the beat idea. So as you can see, I like to color code my stuff because it's much easier for me to navigate through. So in the top, we have all the yellow stuff. It's the instrumental stuff. It's the chords, the chops, and this extra synth hit. Then we have some vocal chops, the Reese bass. The blue ones are all the drums. And then down here, we have some effects, texture loops, and rises and stuff. So let's just start with the top, which are these chords. So if we start by looking at the chords, I am no musical genius, but I like to use tools that can help me. So I'm using the Scalar plugin. And basically what I'm going to do with Scalar is that I'm just going to select the key that I want to work in. So for this instance, it was a B minor scale. And then you have the possibility to just drag in all of the different chord combinations. So I have done this progression with a 1, 7, 4 chord, I believe. And then I'm doing some inversions. And then when I'm like thinking this sounds good enough, you can preview with different sounds. This is just a piano. Like this, you can drag the MIDI right here into the sound that you want to like create. So I'm using Silent for creating this sound. So I just dragged in the MIDI chords and I just did some tweaks. I think I actually deleted one note up here, like this one up here. And then maybe reversed it, like inverted it here in this part here. So we get this. Like Scalar is such a great plugin if you're not that great at music theory and doesn't know that much about chords. It can really help you to, like, you can see what kind of chords that you can use when you're working in a different scale. And it also gives you a lot of chord variations that you can try out to spice up your chord progressions, basically. So I think this is a really handy tool. So for the sound of the sine chord, this is actually just done by using a ton of sine waves. So in Silent, I'm using all of the oscillators. So oscillator A1, A2, and B1 and B2. And here I'm using like for the first oscillator, I'm using like just one voice in a retrigger mode. I'm gonna use like, I have pitched up an octave for the other oscillator with 8 voices, also a sine wave with a little bit of detune. And then for the oscillator B1 and 2, also using sine waves again, also with 8 voices with the retrigger off. This one is being pitched up 2 octaves. This one is just being kept at like 0 octave. I don't know what this is called. And then like for the amplitude, just like with a fair amount of attack and release for both of these amplitude envelopes. And then I'm just using like a filter cutoff at around, I don't even know like what cutoff this is, but right here. And then with like a low pass filter. So you get like a more low pass sound. And then I'm using like a phaser in Silent just to add a little bit of more movement, basically. I don't want to get too much into depth with these sounds because this video is going to be too long. But if you want to get your hands on this project, you can download it on my membership site. The link is in the description down below. So I just like to use sine waves when I'm going for like mellow stuff because they're like fairly simple, but they can sound really nice when you're playing with the right chords and also the right effects processing. So we can go here to the mix track in FL Studio, number 1. So if I turn off all of my effects that I've added to the sine chords, it sounds like this. So okay-ish, but it's sounding a little bit dry. So we can start by adding the first plugin. It's Guitar X6. If you have been a follower on this channel, you know that I love Guitar X6. I'm using the grain delay the bite component and the tremolo for some extra movement. This grain delay component is pretty cool to add some like granular texture, and this one is just to degrade it with almost like a bit degrader, and the tremolo just to add like a little bit of movement to the volume. And then I'm using it in the stereo mode, so it's also going to play around in the stereo field, so it sounds like this. So you can hear like this like bit crush effect that's being applied, and also with like the delay and the auto panning kind of thing. Then the next thing I'm gonna add RC20 with the wobble, almost like some kind of like vibrato effect. Using a little bit of EQ down here to cut the lows and also a little bit of the highs. Using the tone here to boost with a high shelf. Adding a lot of reverb because I want to have that ambient, like spaced out texture sound. And then like, because I don't want this to be like too wide, I'm just reducing the stereo width a little bit, because we're playing around with a lot of stereo effects and I want this tune to sound nice in mono as well. And then basically feeding in some more gain into the plugin just to feed more volume into the distortion unit, and also reducing the gain again. So compensating with the input gain with the output gain, so it doesn't get too loud. Then I'm using the Ozone 9 imager, and I think this is just to make sure like that the lower end of the sound is in mono. Yeah, so this area down here. And then just to make sure that I'm not having too much low end, because I have a Reese bass in this idea, so I'm just cutting away like at 147 hertz. So yeah, that's it for the chords, and these actually play a really crucial part of the whole beat, because they add like that kind of ambient texture to the track. The next, I have these chord chops here. They are almost following the same chords. I think I just switched some notes, like some of are being pitched up an octave or down an octave, but basically following the same chord progression and just doing this like chopped kind of vibe. And the sound is coming from Silent, and I think this is like a preset from Splice. Just has like a more digital kind of sound to it. So I think like processing wise, this is where things starts to get really cool. So this is without any plugins on. Like this sound was pretty cool on its own, but I wanted to really like mess it up. So the first plugin that I added is the Shaper Box with the filter module, and this is basically just to do some like like some LFO movement to a low pass filter. So it's just moving up and down. You see like this. And I'm using it in like an unsynced way, so it's almost like different every time the notes hit. And the next, I added the H delay just to add some ping pong delay, because this just sounds nice. In an 8-dotted pattern or tempo, you could call it. I don't know what you should call it. With a wet at around 40 and a little bit of feedback. And then I'm using like the filters of delay. I really love to play around with these if they are built into the delay unit, is that I can remove some of the low end of the filter, of the delays, sorry. And then I can also remove some of the high end of the delays, so they can sound a little bit more lo-fi, a little bit more like tucked in the back. And I think like, for me, this is like a really great effect. I really love to do it. I think I do it almost all the time. Next, we have like a reverb, actually a lot of width, because I want to have like that washed out sound. And this sounds nice because I'm using the filtering in Shaper Box 2. So the notes are like being filtered in a different way feeding into the reverb and the delays, and this makes like this kind of like moving sound where it's just changing all the time. And I think it's really, really cool, and it just adds a ton of vibes. So this next plugin is pretty cool. I saw it on a Disclosure track breakdown on YouTube, that they were using this Effectrix, like this is like a multi-effect unit with a step sequencer where you can do some creative stuff. But basically what they did with the plugin was just using the crush component and then using bit crush and degrading the sample rate and also adding some distortion. It really added like an extra kind of texture to the vibe. Let's take a listen. So it kind of like destroys the sound in a really cool way. So it just added like textures. So, and then like a fruity EQ just to remove low end. Again, just to make room for that bass that we're going to introduce later. And then the volume shaper just to duck the signal. So using some sidechain. So it's just like pumping a little bit more. Okay, so we're actually really close at being finished with all of like the melodic things. So I have like just one last thing, and this sound up here. Like a little bit of like a weird kind of sound. It's like just this single B note, and it's coming from Flex, which is in FL Studio. I can't remember if it's in all of the different versions of FL Studio, but I just browsed some presets and found this one, and it just sounded nice. I just cranked up the mix of the reverb and the delay, and I think like the only thing that I added afterwards, processing wise, was just neutron free, just to remove some resonance frequencies that was a little bit annoying. And together with like the chords and the chord chops, it sounds like this. Like these three elements are adding so much like texture and vibe and like atmosphere to the track. So I actually haven't had introduced anything more, because now I'm gonna work with like the drums and the bass, and then we have some vocal chops later on. And then in my opinion, like the frequency range are actually being like pretty full. So I don't want to introduce anything more. I actually just want to make everything evolve a little bit. So the next part, I think I'm gonna show you the Reese bass. So it's this one. Just a really, really low and gnarly kind of bass sound. I think it's really, really cool. It's following the chord progression of the chords. And then I have added like these extra notes here, which are in the scale, but just doing like an extra like rhythmic kind of bounce thing. So if we go to the Reese bass, I've actually just put like neutron free on it with a little bit of low end boost, like a low shelf boost. And then using an exciter where I've split off the band. So I'm from everything from like 242 hertz and upwards, I'm adding a little bit of tape saturation to it, just to like emphasize the highs of the bass a little bit more. And then Soothe 2, I'm actually using this as a sidechain to the Kickdrum. I'm gonna show you that later when I'm introducing the Kickdrum. So let me just show you like where this sound comes from. And it comes from a preset in Serum. I think it's also a preset from Splice. Again, if you want to get your hands on this, you can download the project files via the link in the description down below. So, and I just make sure that this was pretty low in the frequency range. So instead of playing up here in like the top range, I just played it like really low, because then I had room for all of the other melodic elements. But it's still like producing that like really nice low end that fits the vibe of the track. So now we're ready to jump into that kick drum. I'm gonna show you those vocal chops later. So like together with the kick drum and the bass, it just has like vibes in it. For the kick drum, I'm using like that standard UK garage two-step vibe with a little bit of swing quantization to it. So these like, this last one is not entirely on the grid. You can see it's been shifted a little bit to the right, and it's just to add a little bit of like swing, shuffle, groove, what you will call it. If we go, let me just show you like the sound of the kick drum. This is just a sample from one of my sample packs called, I think it's called Favorite Kicks. I'm just gonna leave a link in the description down below. But I just like this kick drum because it had like a little bit more like a cool top end to it. It almost sounds like a real like acoustic drum. And then I routed this into a mixer track. And then I added a transient master where I cranked up the attack. And then I added this soft limiter from Apogee just to really like limit the transients a little bit, but it just beefs up the sound a little bit more. Of course, it's also making it louder, but I think this just worked for the vibe that I was going for. And then with the sidechaining that I was talking about with the Reese bass. So in FL Studio, you can go to your channels and you can go and select like every channel down here with this arrow. And then you can select like sidechain to this track. And I sidechain my Kickdrum to my Reese bass. And then you can go into like a plugin like Soothe or any other plugin that allows like sidechain trigger inputs. I'm going to processing here and then selecting the input. And this is the Kickdrum. And then going back to the Soothe plugin. I've also made a video about this, explaining this more in depth. You can watch it up here or here. But basically what it's doing is that I'm enabling the sidechain. So every time the Kickdrum is playing, the Reese bass is being dug down in this area, but only the frequencies where the Kickdrum is present, basically. So if you look at it with the Reese bass, so you can see this area here is where like the Kickdrum is playing, like where it has a lot of low-end frequency information. And we basically just want to duck that away in the Reese bass. But I don't want to duck the complete like signal of the Reese bass because we still have like that nice top end of the Reese bass that we want to keep. So this is something that I'm experimenting with, and it really works well, in my opinion. I think we should move on. Either ways, this video is going to be too long. So if we just go through each of the different drum elements, I'm going to play it together with the Reese bass and the Kickdrum so you can get like the bounce and the vibe of it. So I have a main clap. Okay, as you might hear, there is like a lot of reverb on this. So I think for the sake of you understanding why the sound is happening, I'm just going to briefly explain like all of my like routing in the mixer track. So if you have watched any of my other videos on YouTube, you know that I like to route my drums into a drum bus. So all of these blue elements are the different individual drum elements, and they are all being routed into this drum bus. And on this drum bus, there is a Soothe, removing some resonance frequencies in the drums, just to make it sound a little bit nicer. Then I'm adding this RC24 reverb. And it has a lot of pre-delay, so it gets like this like kind of shimmering, like smearing effect, I think it's called. Because you get the transient of the drums are being like played through, and then the reverb is being applied, at least as I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments. But it just adds like a really cool vibe to the drums. And then it has like a little bit of decay, so you get a little bit more atmospheric ambient vibes to the drums. And then I'm using like some bus compression to glue together the drums, and I'm using a EQ just to move a lot of the low ends that's not necessary, because my Kickdrum is not being routed to a drum bus, it's being routed to a separate low end bus. And then lastly, I'm using an Ozone 9 just to boost the stereo width of the high end, basically. So these two areas. So this is from like 1.3K hertz up to 9 hertz. And you can see I have just boosted it a little bit just to get a little bit of like widening to the drums. Okay, so now we have the drum bus in place. Now we can just go through each of the drum elements. So we had the main clap just playing on every second beat. Then I have layered it with a snap. This one. Pretty cool. Then I'm using like this clap off thing. This one. So it's playing on the off beat sometimes just to give it like a little bit more bounce. Also having like a little bit where it's shifted off the grid just to get a little bit more like shuffly feel to it. Then I'm using an open hi-hat in like a 909 kind of sound. And one cool thing that I learned like not so long ago is that in FL Studio, now I have like all of these notes on all of the offbeat notes. But what you can do to add a little bit of quick movement is that you can highlight everything. Then you can press Alt and R for random. I think on Mac, you can press Command and R. Then you get this menu up here. And if you just deselect this one and just use the levels, basically what you can do is that you can crank this up with the panning and the velocity, and you can see down in the bottom, it's changing the notes in a random way. So you get a little bit of more like not everything being the same velocity level and the same panning settings. So it can just add a little bit of tiny movement. If you look down here, I have a little bit of panning add to the open hi-hats and also velocity as well, because I hate to have like really static drums. It can get a little bit boring. This is just a really subtle thing that you might not hear instantly, but just a little bit of extra vibes. Okay, so I have this like hi-hat texture thing where I'm playing like this pattern here and then just shifting it down a little bit. And this is a really cool way to add like extra texture to drum one-shots. Just try to pitch them down on the piano roll to get some interesting textures. So it plays like this. Pretty cool. Then it's layered with a closed hi-hat, playing this pattern. Again, for getting like these really cool vibes, shifting your drums off the grid is the key. I love to do this, playing around with it. I can just give your tracks more vibe instead of it being like a little bit too static on the grid. Then I have like this skippy perk thing down here. And also here I played with pitching it down on the piano roll, just adding vibes. Pretty nice. I can't actually sit still on my chair right now, so it might be squeaking a little bit. Then I have like this low perk thing. And this one actually sounds like this, but I just pitched it down like 2 octaves, like 1 here and 2 down here. So you get like this really low sounding thing, but it just, again, for the vibes. But always like make sure when you're doing this, when I'm like pitching this down, it's gonna generate some lower frequencies because you're pitching down the sample. Just make sure that it's not conflicting with your kick drum or your bass. That's why on my drum bus, again, I use this like high pass here, just to remove any of that low-end rumble that I might create when I'm like pitching down my samples. Okay, so we are soon done with the drums. So when I'm like programming all of these drums like with one-shots, I actually love to like just layer them with like just a drum loop found on Splice. So I found like this top loop from Splice. Just in that like classic garage vibe. So we have the drums like this. And this is without the drum loop. It just adds something cool that I like couldn't create with the other sounds. So it's just like a really cool thing to like layer your drums this way, in my opinion. So the last one is like pretty cool. This is like a stretched ride hit. Sounds like this. Let me just try to like repitch it. It's this one, like the original sound, and I just pitched it down like with this like multiplicator here, just to make the sample really long. And then we have like this really cool texture here. Okay, pretty nice. It just like adds ton of like ambient character to these drums. And I was listening to like some Burial stuff, and I just love like how he uses all of this like atmospheric stuff to his drums and like textures and like stretching stuff. And I just got inspired and tried to stretch some stuff myself. So with this like stretched ride hit underneath in my playlist, you can see I have some automation. I have 2 automations going on here. I have like a trance gate playing right here. Let me just open the mixer track. So I have like a trance gate from Kilohertz. These plugins are for free, which are playing like this stuttering kind of effect down here. So I'm basically just putting like the mix all the way up, so it's like 100% on, and just fading it away slowly in like this slope here. And I think it was a great way to just add some variation to this stretched hi-hat, the stretched ride hit here. Instead of having it to play all the same all the way through, it's just changing. Just a nice tip. And then I wanted to do something more to it. So I actually just pitched it down even more with a pitch shifter. So right here, we're going like lower, and then combined with like the transgate. Nice. And this is also just done by using the pitch shifter from kilohertz as well. And then having like some EQ just to move any unwanted low end. And then I think like lastly, I have some clap fills right here. Just between sections, just to add a little bit of like transition stuff. So yeah, that's it for like my drums and the bass and all the instruments. Let's move on to those vocal chops. So for the vocal chops, I love to use the plugin called Arcade from Output. I think it's an online subscription-based plugin, you could call it. And Arcade has like so many different sample libraries that you can play on your keyboard. You can like lock it with the key signature that you're using, and it's also locked to the tempo of your project. So I basically was just browsing some sample packs in Arcade, and then I stumbled across some cool vocal chops that I just bounced to audio because it's a little bit more easy to work with. So I had like this sequence down here, right here. And then combined with this one in the bottom. Just adding like these small bits and phrases, it just sounds really nice. Let's just play like everything. So they are like tucked in the back, but they just adds a little bit more extra atmospheric vibe to the beat. And as you can hear, I had like a lot of processing on them. So let me just play the chords and the chord chops right here together. So if we go to the mixer track on the vocal chops, I add like this fruity EQ2, basically just to move like super highs and a little bit of the low end. So just having a little bit more like lo-fi, I would say. Yeah, I thought it was like a little bit too bright in my opinion, to my taste, like with having this area up here playing. So I just cut it away with the low pass. Then I added like the RC20 for some like a little bit of wobble grid and also a lot of distortion because I wanted like that distorted sound. And I added RC24, the reverb component that I used on my drum bus, and just add a little bit more mix basically and turn down the pre-delay. And then I added like fruity delay free at the 4:0 tempo time and around 43% of width, and then like a little bit of feedback, and then used like the low pass cutoff for the feedback, so it's slowly disappearing. And then using a shaper box just to duck the signal, like sidechaining the signal. And this is basically how I do a lot of my vocal chops, because I really like stereo spread out long delayed vocal chops basically, because I'm just a sucker for that. So let me just turn off all of the effects. So this is without. So you can get like really far by just using the right processing on your sounds. Just get creative with them. You can create some really awesome sounds just slapping weird stuff on the mixer channel. So I think it was just the icing on the cake. And then I actually wanted to add even more icing on the cake. In some of the Burial tracks, I noticed that he used a lot of like field recordings and texture loops. So I looked in some of my sample packs and like I found this, like it was something that I recorded while being on vacation on Mallorca. It's also a sample pack that you can go check out. The link is also down in the description down below. This is like some palm leaves that's just rattling like this. And basically I just layered with like a crackle, like vinyl crackle sound. Some cassette noise. And then this field recording, also from the Mallorca sample pack. This one down in the bottom here. And then I added like just to make it a little bit weird, I actually added like a flanger on it, and then also the transgate, just at like 50% wet, and then also like an EQ just to move like on with the low end, but just to add a little bit of like randomness, motion, what you could call it, to it, instead of just having it like this. Because it's okay, but I wanted to like really like make the sound weird. And because this is just something that's being put in the background, I can become like a lot more like creative, do some weird stuff. So together, like these are like all of these texture loops that I'm using. And let's just play like the whole beat with the textures, and then I'm gonna pull them out so you can hear the difference. Okay, and this is without. This is with again. Like this just sounds organic and natural to me. It just sounds like nature, and it has like these weird, almost like kind of mistakes in this like recording, but it just sounds really nice. It just makes it sound a little bit more human, in my opinion. Down here, there's like an automation. This is just automating the rate of the flanger for this field recording here. So just making it, I think, a little bit faster. Really not something that you hear in the recording, but I just wanted to add it to add some variation to it. And then of course I'm using these like small transitional stuff, like a riser, this downlifting effect, and then this like classic laser thing. So just something like that. Okay, so that's actually the beat. I really hope you enjoyed it. And I know that this video was a little bit long, but I want to show you like all my thoughts, why I do things and why I don't do things. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed it. So let's just play the beat from the beginning. Enjoy. Wicked. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, it means so much to me if you smash that like button or even subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss any future videos on this channel. I have also launched a Discord server for producers. It's a place where we can share our track ideas with each other, get feedback, provide feedback. It's generally just a cool place to hang out and talk about music. And I really want you to get involved. If you want to, you can join the Discord via the link in the description down below. Also, as I mentioned in the video, I have a lot of sample packs and preset packs on my web shop. If you want to support me even further, you can go and browse those. The link is also in the description down below. So I hope to see you in the next video. Take care. Peace.